If you've never had to evacuate your home with only a few minutes' notice, I hope you never do. 3 years ago, I lived just outside Bend, Oregon. It wasn't a fancy place, just a small rental cabin tucked between tall pine trees, but it was home. I worked as an HVAC technician, kept to myself, and spent weekends fishing or fixing old tools in the garage. One August afternoon, everything changed. A wildfire that had been burning miles away suddenly shifted direction after strong winds rolled in. My phone started screaming with emergency alerts, telling everyone to leave immediately. I grabbed my backpack, a small lockbox with important documents, 2 changes of clothes, and my old Labrador, Duke. That was all I had time for before jumping into my aging Honda Civic. By the next morning, my neighborhood was gone. The cabin, my furniture, my tools, family photos, everything. Insurance covered part of the loss,
But anyone who's dealt with insurance knows the check rarely replaces your life. For almost 8 months, I bounced between friends' couches, cheap motels, and eventually a temporary trailer provided through a local relief program. That's when I realized something important.
My little Honda was reliable, but it couldn't carry much of anything. Every time I moved, I had to borrow someone else's truck or rent a trailer. I promised myself that if I ever got back on my feet, I'd buy something that could handle whatever life threw at me next. So, I stopped spending money. No vacations. No eating out. No expensive gadgets. Every overtime shift I could get, I took it.
It wasn't glamorous, but every paycheck pushed me a little closer to my goal. Almost 18 months later, I finally had enough saved. I started looking for used pickup trucks all over Central Oregon. Most of them were either overpriced, rusted beyond repair, or had enough miles to circle the earth several times. Then, one Saturday, I found an ad. A dark blue 2016 Ford F-150. One owner, clean title, just over 95,000 miles. The asking price was surprisingly reasonable. I called immediately. The seller introduced himself as David. He sounded friendly but exhausted.
When I arrived at his property outside Redmond, I understood why. He walked slowly, with a noticeable limp. He apologized for moving so carefully and explained he'd injured his back on a construction site a year earlier. I hate selling it, he admitted, resting one hand on the hood. But I can't climb into it anymore. My doctor says it's time to stop pretending I'll recover enough to use it. He handed me every maintenance receipt he'd kept since buying it new. Oil changes, brake service, transmission flush, new tires, even a recently installed radiator. The truck wasn't perfect. There were a few scratches on the passenger door and a dent near the rear bumper, but mechanically, it drove like it had another 100,000 miles left in it. After the test drive, I told David I wanted it. He smiled. I figured you would. While filling out the paperwork, he surprised me. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago," he said. Then he knocked $1,000 off the price. I argued with him for several minutes. He wouldn't take the money. "Spend it on recovery gear," he laughed, "or a camper one day." That truck became the first thing I'd owned in years that actually felt like mine. I cleaned it every weekend, installed a locking toolbox in the bed, added emergency supplies, blankets, flashlights, portable battery packs, a first aid kit, enough food and water for several days. Some people joked that I was turning into one of those survival guys. Maybe. But after watching an entire town disappear in smoke, being prepared doesn't seem paranoid anymore. About 3 weeks later, I drove nearly 2 hours to look at a used travel trailer someone had listed online. The pictures looked incredible. Reality?
Not so much. The roof leaked, half the electrical outlets didn't work, the floor near the bathroom felt soft enough to collapse. I thanked the owner and left. Since I'd already made the drive, I decided to grab lunch before heading home. There was a small roadside diner packed with locals. The burgers smelled incredible. I parked near the entrance, locked my truck, and went inside. About 40 minutes later, I walked back into the parking lot carrying a refill coffee. That's when I noticed someone standing beside my truck. A woman, maybe early 40s, well-dressed, expensive sunglasses. She wasn't just looking at it. She was slowly walking around it, studying every inch, as if she already knew the vehicle. The moment she saw me approaching, she took off her sunglasses. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion, then disbelief, and finally, anger. She looked straight at me and asked one question. "Where did you get this truck?" The way she said it made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. Something told me lunch was officially over. For a second, I honestly thought she had mistaken me for someone else. I gave an awkward smile and pointed at the truck. "I bought it a few weeks ago." She didn't blink. From who? There wasn't anything friendly about the question. Her voice was flat, demanding. I shrugged. "A guy named David?" The moment I said his name, her entire face changed. Her jaw tightened. She folded her arms. So he actually sold it. Now I was confused. "You know him?" Instead of answering, she walked straight past me and placed her hand on the driver's door. Not touching the handle, just resting her palm against the paint, like she was trying to convince herself it was real. "You have no idea what he did, do you?" "I honestly don't know what you're talking about." She laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was the kind of laugh people make when they're trying not to explode. "He promised me this truck." I looked at her for a second. "I'm sorry, but I legally bought it." He had no right to sell it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key fob. "I have the signed title." He lied. "Maybe, but that's between you and him." She stared at me. Then she looked at the truck again, then back at me. "You don't understand." I could already tell this conversation wasn't going anywhere. "I'm really sorry if something happened between you two, but I paid for the truck. The DMV transferred the title into my name." Her voice suddenly became louder. "That truck belongs to my family." People walking across the parking lot began slowing down. A couple loading groceries into their SUV stopped to watch. I hated being the center of attention. I lowered my voice. "If you think he sold something he wasn't allowed to sell, you need to talk to him, not me." She ignored me. Instead, she walked around the front of the truck. She stopped at the driver's side fender, ran her fingers across a small scratch near the headlight. I remember when this happened. I looked closer. It was just another tiny scratch among dozens. She smiled sadly. "My son dropped his bicycle right here." For the first time since this started, I didn't feel angry. I felt uncomfortable. Because she wasn't making that part up. She remembered details nobody would invent. I asked carefully, "Is David your ex-husband?" She didn't answer immediately. Finally, she nodded. "We're in the middle of a divorce." That explained a lot. but not everything. I'm sorry you're going through that. She looked me dead in the eye. You should give me the truck. I almost thought I'd heard her wrong. What? You seem like a decent guy. You can sue him for your money. I just want my truck back. I shook my head. I can't do that. I spent almost every dollar I had buying this. I've already transferred ownership. She took another step closer. So, you're keeping stolen property? No. I'm keeping property I legally purchased. She crossed her arms. We'll let the police decide. Before I could even respond, she pulled out her phone. I assumed she was calling David. She wasn't. 911? What's your emergency? I stared at her in disbelief. She was actually calling the police. This man stole my vehicle. I couldn't help laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was so unbelievable. The dispatcher must have asked a question. She immediately pointed at me. He's trying to leave. I wasn't. My truck hadn't even been unlocked. I simply stood there holding my coffee. Within minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies rolled into the parking lot. The woman rushed toward them before they'd even stepped out of their SUV. She was talking so fast, I couldn't understand half of what she was saying. One deputy listened. The other walked over to me. Afternoon, sir. Mind telling me what's going on? I handed him my driver's license before he even asked. I think this is all one big misunderstanding. Then I reached into my glove box and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of everything. Bill of sale, signed title, registration, insurance. The deputy raised an eyebrow. You came prepared. I smiled. After losing everything once, I've learned to keep paperwork for anything important. He nodded. Fair enough.
He started flipping through the documents. Meanwhile, I could hear the woman raising her voice behind us. He's lying! He knows that truck isn't his! The second deputy calmly asked her the same question several different ways. Is the vehicle currently registered to you? No. Have you ever held the title? No. Then who did? She hesitated. Finally, my husband. The deputy looked over at me, then back at her. Ex-husband? She looked down. We're separated. The deputy sighed quietly. I had a feeling he already knew exactly where this conversation was headed.
The deputy closed the folder containing my paperwork and looked at both of us for a long moment. Finally, he broke the silence. Sir, would you mind waiting here for a minute? Of course. He walked back to his partner, and the 2 officers quietly compared notes. The woman stood with her arms crossed, glaring at me as if I had personally ruined her life. I could hear bits and pieces of their conversation. Title is clean, registered 2 weeks ago, civil dispute. After another minute, the older deputy approached us. Ma'am, he said calmly, based on everything we've verified, Mr. Miller is the legal owner of this vehicle. She stared at him in disbelief. No. I'm afraid, yes. You didn't check everything. We did. My husband stole it from me. The deputy kept his voice level. If your husband sold marital property during divorce proceedings, that's something... Not him. She pointed directly at me. He knew. I couldn't help shaking my head. I met your husband once. He showed me maintenance records. I paid him. He signed the title. That was the end of it. She ignored every word. Instead, she suddenly marched toward my truck. Before anyone realized what she was doing, she grabbed the driver's door handle and yanked as hard as she could.
Locked. She pulled again. Then again. Hard enough that the truck rocked slightly. "Ma'am?"
The deputy's tone changed instantly. "Step away from the vehicle." She refused. "This is my truck!" The second deputy stepped forward. "I need you to let go of the handle." Instead, she hit the side of the truck with the palm of her hand. Not hard enough to dent it. Hard enough to make a loud metallic bang that echoed across the parking lot. Several people eating on the restaurant patio turned to look. One guy even pulled out his phone. The woman finally stepped back. Her breathing was quick. Her hands were shaking. The older deputy lowered his voice. "Ma'am, are you okay?" That simple question seemed to break something inside her. Her anger disappeared almost instantly. She started crying. Not fake crying. Real crying. The kind that comes after weeks or months of trying to hold everything together. "I gave him 20 years, she whispered. "I stayed when he lost his job. I stayed when he got hurt. And now he's selling everything." Nobody spoke. Even I didn't know what to say. The deputy nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry you're going through that, but this man didn't do anything illegal." She looked at me through tears. "I just wanted one thing." I honestly felt bad for her. Maybe David had treated her terribly. Maybe she had treated David terribly. I had no idea. And honestly, it wasn't my business. The deputy handed her a small card. "If you believe assets were sold improperly, contact your divorce attorney. This isn't a criminal case. It's a civil matter." She looked at the card for several seconds before slipping it into her purse. Then she wiped her eyes. Without another word, she walked away. The deputies waited until she climbed into a silver crossover parked across the lot. Only after she drove away did one of them turn back toward me. "You handled that better than most people would." I laughed nervously. I wasn't sure whether to argue or apologize. "You picked the right option." He handed back my documents. "Keep copies of these in the truck." "I always do." He smiled. "Good habit." As they were leaving, he paused. "One more thing. If she contacts you again, don't argue, don't meet her, and don't try to solve her divorce." I chuckled. That wasn't exactly on my weekend schedule. He laughed. "Glad to hear it." I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and sat there for a few seconds. The whole encounter felt surreal. I wasn't angry anymore. Mostly, I was exhausted. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed north toward home. In my rearview mirror, I noticed the silver crossover sitting at the exit. For a second, I thought she was waiting for me. Then she turned the opposite direction and disappeared down the highway. I let out a long breath. Maybe, just maybe, that would be the last time I ever saw her. I had no idea how wrong I was. For the next couple of months, life finally started feeling normal. Work was busy. The truck ran perfectly. I even started looking at small travel trailers again, hoping to buy one before the end of summer. Every now and then I'd think about the woman from the diner, but the memory faded a little more each week. I figured she'd accepted reality. I was wrong. About 3 months later, my best friend Tyler called me. "Hey, you busy Saturday?" "Depends." My younger brother finally bought his first house. "Nice. We could use another truck for moving day." "I'll be there." Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Blue skies, 75 degrees,
just enough breeze to make moving furniture bearable. We spent nearly 6 hours hauling boxes, couches, appliances, and more boxes than seemed physically possible for one family to own. By early afternoon, everyone was starving. Tyler grinned. "There's a diner about 5 minutes away." I laughed. "As long as they have burgers. They've got the best burgers in the county." As soon as he told me where it was, I froze. It was the same diner. The exact same parking lot. For a second, I thought about
suggesting somewhere else. Instead, I shrugged. What were the chances? 3 months had passed. There were thousands of people in the area. The odds of seeing her again were basically zero. Or so I thought. Lunch was great. We joked about Tyler nearly dropping a washing machine down the porch steps. His brother laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. For the first time in a long while, life felt easy. Then the front door opened. I recognized her instantly. She looked almost exactly the same, except this time she was carrying a tiny white dog tucked inside a designer shoulder bag. The dog couldn't have weighed more than 6 pounds. She walked confidently toward an empty booth. Before she could sit down, one of the servers stepped in front of her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. No pets inside." Without missing a beat, she answered, "He's an emotional support animal." The server smiled politely. "I understand. But only trained service animals are allowed in the dining room." Her smile disappeared. "I've been through this before."
"So have we," the server replied. "My therapist signed the paperwork." "I'm sure she did, but that doesn't change our policy." Several customers looked up from their meals. The room suddenly became very quiet. The woman crossed her arms. "So you're discriminating against me?" Before the server could answer, the restaurant manager walked over. He looked tired. Not surprised. Just tired. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we talked about this a few months ago."
"You remember me?"
"Yes. And the answer is still the same. You can order takeout, you can eat on the patio, but the dog can't come inside unless it's a trained service animal." For a moment, I thought she was going to explode. Instead, she looked around the restaurant. Everyone was watching. She slowly realized she wasn't winning this argument. With an exaggerated sigh, she muttered, "Fine." She ordered her food to go. The manager thanked her. A few minutes later, she left the building, still mumbling under her breath. Tyler leaned across the table. "Do you know her?" I hesitated. Then I quietly told them about everything that had happened with the truck. Neither of them believed me. "No way." "I'm serious. That's the woman." Tyler laughed. "You've got the weirdest luck of anyone I know." When we finished eating, we walked outside. She was standing near the entrance, talking loudly on her phone. Her little dog was sniffing around the flower beds while she paid absolutely no attention to. As we passed by, she looked directly at me. For one long second, our eyes met. I felt my stomach tighten. "Did she recognize me?" She frowned. Not in recognition, more like annoyance. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. I immediately looked away. "Sorry, didn't mean to." She rolled her eyes and went back to her phone conversation. We kept walking. Tyler whispered, "That was her?" I nodded. "I think she didn't recognize me." Then he looked toward my truck. Probably because of that. I followed his gaze. After buying the truck, I'd spent weeks fixing the bodywork. Most of the dents were gone. The faded blue paint had been professionally wrapped in pearl white. The wheels were different. The grille had been replaced. Even the license plates had changed after I renewed the registration. Honestly, it barely looked like the same vehicle anymore. We loaded back up and drove away. As I checked the mirror, I noticed her glance toward my truck one last time. She squinted, almost as if something about it seemed familiar.
Then she shrugged, turned away.
And never looked back. For the first time since buying that truck, I felt completely relaxed. Sometimes, the best way to leave the past behind is simply to keep driving forward.
Sometimes life doesn't give you closure. It simply gives you another chance to move forward. As for me, I never saw her again. And honestly, I hope I never do.
After losing everything in the wildfire, I thought rebuilding my life would be the hardest challenge I'd ever face. Turns out, moving on isn't just about replacing what you've lost. It's about refusing to let the past take away what you've worked so hard to rebuild. And this truck, it wasn't just another vehicle anymore. It became a reminder that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you can always find a way to get back up. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories every week. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.